Media Network proudly presents the Science of Mind Saturday Conversations. Learn more about the Science of Mind philosophy, faith, and way of life. Join our team of experts for a weekly deep dive discussion. Come study the science of mind, chapter by chapter, and resources from the Science of Mind archives. Plan to join us every Saturday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. Only on the New Thought Media Network.
Oh, good morning, everyone. It's so great to see you at the beginning of the year where we're starting over with the Science of Mind textbook. And, this is our big book. I still have my paperback copy, and it's kind of frayed on the edges, and the pages are well used. And it's just wonderful to get to start out again this year. And we used to call this Back to Basics. And, we really are going from the very beginning of the textbook to the very end this year again. And it's always wonderful to revisit these pages and get a new take on them. Because every time I read the Science of Mind textbook, there's something else that jumps out at me. So I am Reverend Victoria Bomberry, and I'm located in Riverside, California. And what else would you like to know about me in this new year? This new year, I'm excited to move forward with my own projects and also, really get back to basics, because we can be very distracted in times like this when there's a lot of things going on all fronts. And for a lot of people, there's uncertainty and a lot of need that's coming up. So we go back to the very beginning and kind of look at where we came from in terms of a movement and in terms of the underpinnings of religious science. And, what I love about Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, is that he was a very curious person. He didn't have a lot of formal education, and he was basically an autodidact, although he did study with a professor from USC when he wanted to delve into philosophy more. So that's what we're seeing right now with the first chapters that we're looking at. We're looking at his kind of digestion of Western philosophy. And it's very interesting because he is writing this right at the beginning of the 20th century. And the 20th century can, that's 100 years ago now that he was writing. And we can kind of see the intellectual threads that were there, the spiritual threads. And also at that time, there were a lot of new ways of expressing spirit springing up, from the 12-step movement with Bill Wilson to the Pentecostal movement and all kinds of things in between, religious science, theosophy. All these things were kind of rising up at that time in a very serious way. Of course, New Thought has its beginnings in the 19th century, the late 19th century, with Christian Science and, a look in at this developing discipline, psychology, right? So we've got all these threads kind of coming together. And like I said, Ernest Holmes was very, very curious. So he was right in that mix. And he just jumped right in to explore what this is all about. What is life all about? And that's the philosophical question that human beings have been engaged in since the beginning of time. What is it all about? Where do we fit? Who are we? All of that kind of thing. What is God? What is spirit? What is that numinous experience at the heart of all human uh, life? And this is also a time when there was a lot of people who were denying that aspect of spirit in people's lives. And I think we kind of got at it in a different way, going into psychology and science and looking at it from that perspective that is purely scientific, materialistic, uh, the materialist view of life. And, we do have the Ernest Holmes looking at science as well. However, Ernest Holmes had this, I'm just going to say that he did because we look at his work and he definitely had a desire to express himself as a spiritual being. And he wanted also to embrace science. So the big question, science doesn't deal with God, right? Uh, things are all things that you can observe and test and develop evidence for what it is, what the phenomenon is that you're looking at. And it doesn't concern itself with the metaphysical. And what Ernest Holmes was doing was looking at both of those aspects of truth seeking and, acknowledging the necessity of science and also kind of a scientific inquiry into metaphysics. So that's a huge leap, and I think if we want to look at the interdisciplinarity of Ernest Holmes, we look at that. He was able to do that, and people do call him the great synthesizer. And he did create something that, a way of thinking and approaching life that combined many different disciplines and came up with, really, for his time, a very new way of looking at life and at God and at spirit or whatever we want to call it, and how that works in our individual lives and by extension in our collective lives as well. So he kind of covered it all. And this first chapter is titled The Thing Itself. And I always thought that's kind of a funny title. When I first started studying science of mind, I thought that's a real funny title for a chapter, The Thing Itself. And what is the thing? Uh, it seems very vague, right? What is that thing? And it sounds, just amorphous. We don't know what that thing is. And what Ernest Holmes begins this chapter by saying is he says, we all look forward to the day when science and religion shall walk hand in hand through the invisible and visible. Science knows nothing of opinion, but recognizes a government of law whose principles are universal. Yet any scientist who refuses to accept intangible values has no adequate basis for the values which he has already discovered. Revelation must keep faith with reason and religion with law, while intuition is ever spreading its wings for greater flights, and science must justify faith in the invisible. So just think about it. That's a really tightly packed paragraph. And of course, we know during that time, science was dealing with the invisible as well, because they were studying the laws of physics, and there was a new physics born at that time that was not Newtonian. It was, very mechanical, in other words, and it was looking at something that was invisible. What are these invisible forces that are at work in the universe, and can we? How do we ascertain them, and how do we create mathematical equations that will represent those things that we are observing? Even if we can't see them, we observe the effects of these invisible forces and what is happening. And just think about that opportunity to go into a different direction, that is sort of what we do when we're going inward. We can't see what that spirit is that we talk about, that inward and residing presence in us. It's invisible, and yet we experience it in a variety of ways. We see it in the outer, but we also see it in the interior of our being. So, what we're getting at with the thing itself is, what is this that has laws, that is universal? What is that? People call it, have many names for what that is. Some people kind of look at God, right? This force that is holding everything together, or create this creative force, and they have different ideas of what it looks like. So let's take a look at the way that Michelangelo represented this force and its relationship to human beings. So the first image that we have is Michelangelo's Adam. And we see that this creative force is reaching out and touching the hand of David, of Adam. And we see that this is an anthropomorphic image of, can you keep the slide up for a little bit? We see that it's an anthropomorphic image of God. And, for a long time, people would not make images of God, because they saw this as sacrilegious, that you don't make an image of God. And yet, here we have Michelangelo creating this image that we can really relate to, the Father reaching out and actually animating Adam in the creation. And we see all those celestial beings represented in this image as well. So, this is kind of the idea that a lot of us may have grown up with, this bearded guy in the sky, and, that beautiful image of the relationship of Creator and humankind, and which is a lovely image, and something that, resonates, I think, still today with us, that we do have, we are touching the hand of God as we are born or created in that image. So this is a beautiful, beautiful representation that gets at something that is very, very dear to us, that relationship to God, right? The second image that I want to show is a little bit later. This is William Blake, and this is the Ancient of Days. And I've always loved this image. Again, it's an anthropomorphic image with that depicts the divine, the Most High, the Ancient of Days. That's another name for God, right? The Ancient of Days, as this grand architect. So you see the image of creation as being architecturally uh, designed. right? So this is again a way that we're understanding the creative process and this force that we know, or the spirit that we know, that is ever creative as this grand architect. And it's interesting to think about that, because we do, that does get at a truth, right? There is this design that goes through all of the universe. There is this source, this creative source that has set this all in motion. And this is how we see it. It's an architect. And we can grasp that, right? Now, the third image I want to show is a very different image. And this is Hildegard uh, of Bingham. And she was a nun, and she had mystic visions. And you can see that this is not anthropomorphic. There are some anthropomorphic figures here. However, this is a much different representation of the cosmos and how things may have come into existence, right? And um, how this depiction is more abstract. It's not centered in um, in something that looks familiar. However, when I look at this image, the image is put together in such a way that it's very coherent. It looks like it's the different aspects of this image are repeated, and they're beautiful, right? They have symmetry to them. They have an aesthetic, and they have different elements: the air, fire, water. Those elements are there that make up our universe. So those basic elements are represented here as the building blocks of the universe. So that's when we're getting back to how we look at what the cosmos is created from, and how some sort of law is holding it all together. There's principles that make it possible for all of these things to come together. So as we try to make sense of the thing itself, we can see that there's all kinds of different imagery that human beings have developed to try to make sense of this. What does this mean, right? What is it? How do we describe it? And, what we come down to, I think, mostly are those images that the mystics have provided for us, whether in words or in illustrations, the way that Hildegard does. So it's kind of uh, more experiential, right? How do we apprehend what the thing itself is? It is through our personal experience. So Ernest Holmes is very, very uh, interested in freedom, right? What does freedom mean? And, we go beyond that in a metaphysical sense. We go beyond, kind of the easy notions of freedom that are bandied about today in the rhetoric of our times. He's getting at something that is much more um, fundamental to the human soul or psyche. And what he says is, to suppose that the creative intelligence of the universe would create man in bondage and leave him bound would be to dishonor the creative power which we call God. To suppose that God could make man as an individual without leaving him to discover himself would be to suppose an impossibility. Individuality must be spontaneous, it can never be automatic. So, again, that emphasis on experience and, and choice, right? We're not, we do have laws that govern the universe. However, that inner discovery and how we behave in this universe is an individual thing that that's our freedom to choose, our freedom to behave in a way that that expresses who we are. And let's stop there. It expresses who we are. And that individuality, we're talking about, the beginning of the 20th century, and we can look at another great thinker, Carl Jung, who recognized Ernest Holmes as the American mystic and the only American mystic that he he identified during his time on Earth. So we have these two thinkers who are looking at individuality in a very different way. We can look at cultures that put a real emphasis on individuality, right? And there's a lot of ways you can go with this. However, what Ernest Holmes does is set in motion this whole idea of laws that are there. There's reason and there's faith. There's those three things that are at work with what it means to be free, right? So it's not, we can go further into this. It's not just individuality. I do what I want, and this, whatever my libido and ego decides, that's what I do, that's my freedom. No, there's a lot of things that are going on at the same time. If we go back to that image of Hildegard's, yes, this is an ordered universe. Yes, we have freedom within it, and yet there are laws that are there that hold things together in a way that uh, goes beyond what we may see as seeming chaos. So, this is bringing forth that form materially and that form of consciousness that can navigate through the cosmos. And I brought up Carl Jung, and Carl Jung also was very into what he called individuation. So his thought was pretty much the same as Ernest Holmes, that our work here on earth is to individuate, to come to that place where we are expressing at the highest level who we are, and that potentiality. And that potentiality, uh, has there's a lot of things that are going on around us that give us choice, that give us an opportunity to use our reason, to use science, to use faith to move through. So Carl Jung also felt like, he was adamant actually. He didn't even want there to be Jungians, right? He thought everyone needs to find their own way through experience, and not to have a dogma that they're following. And I would say that's exactly how Ernest Holmes expresses himself. He wasn't creating a dogma, he was a way shower to say, delve into this, look at it, try it. And, the ultimate goal is this freedom. And I think we can put freedom and enlightenment on the same plane, right? That freedom and enlightenment go hand in hand. So, this entire first page is devoted to this idea of freedom. And he says that the divine plan is one of freedom. Bondage is not God ordained. Freedom is the birthright of every living soul. All instinctively feel this. The truth points to freedom under law, and that means the laws of the universe. And he admonishes us to listen to that inner voice. And that inner voice, of course, is that voice of the Most High, that grand architect image, the Most High. It can show us the way, right? And that very intimate image of God as reaching out and touching us, giving us life, and giving us freedom to move through this life and discover what life is all about for ourselves. Now, as we move into the 21st century, our our image right now is, the kind of the big emphasis right now is on artificial intelligence, right? And just imagine, we do see um, how we create this machine that does what is programmed into it without real freedom, right? There's not freedom there. And this is very different than this creative there's some similarities, right, in the creative process, but there's a difference between these machines that we're creating and this creation of this consciousness that we have all as our birthright. Let me put it that way. It's our birthright. We are conscious in the same way that consciousness exists throughout the universe. So we are a part of that. It is in us and through us, and we are navigating this consciousness and learning more about it as we navigate life. Now, the next sentence I think is very important because this is where Ernest Holmes introduces love into the equation. Like I said, he's looking at science, and science creates these equations to describe the universe, and he is adding to our word equation love. The great love of the universe must be one with the great law of its own being, and we approach love through the law. This then is the teaching, love and law. As the love of God is perfect, so the law of God also is perfect. We must understand both. So early on, in the first chapter of the Science of Mind textbook, we have love and law working hand in hand. So he tells us that the study of the science of mind is a study of first cause, spirit, mind, or that invisible essence, that ultimate stuff of intelligence from which everything comes, the power back of creation, the thing itself. And again, the thing itself comes up, and that thing itself is that creative force and the power of that. And I think we can kind of throw in something from the Buddhists here, right? The Buddhists say um, they use compassion or loving kindness, is how we interpret this. And another way of interpreting um, this is unconditional love, right? They, for compassion. So I like to use unconditional love when I talk about that Buddhist principle of compassion, unconditional love. So they have this precept that says you have to have love, or compassion, wisdom, and power. That's what we develop over our lifetime. That's what we're working on. Love, unconditional love, or compassion, power, and wisdom. And I think that that is what Ernest Holmes is getting at too, because we're looking at love and law, right? The laws of the universe, how things are put together and held together. And we could even say by the great architect, right? And power and you know and wisdom. Without those three things, nothing can work, right? And those are the things that we're perfecting as we move through our lives. We put a big emphasis on love, which is absolutely necessary. We live within law, the laws of the universe, natural laws, and we develop wisdom. And wisdom is something that I think we haven't been putting much emphasis on recently. What is wisdom? Wisdom is something that is gained through by human beings through experience and coupled with both unconditional love and power. And how we use that power determines the degree of freedom for ourselves and others. They're all one and the same, ourself and the other the same, right? So we have that freedom, and there's also this structure around us that we either cooperate with or we don't. And when we cooperate with it, then we achieve those goals that we set for ourselves. So Ernest Holmes is interested in how do we use this knowledge, right? How do we actually engage with it? And what do we do? He says we're dealing with a definite principle here, the thing itself. So how do we engage with it? How do we consciously engage with it? We're not just willy nilly floating around. How do we consciously engage with it? And this is a question that we've always had as human beings. How do we consciously, or how do we engage with God? And there's been this idea that we're these little motes of dust, and here is this big powerful being, that man in the sky. Uh, and of course, we can't be anything like that, right? It's huge, and we're just these tiny specks. However, we know that we go through this process of individuation, and we begin to see as individuals, yes, we are individuals, yet we are connected to God. And just seeing Adam reaching out and being touched by God, that's what we feel that, right? We want to feel that in our very being, that principle. And this next part, I think this is what I always love this, because the law is the law, right? It works. It holds the universe together. And Ernest Holmes says the universe never plays favorites. And we know that there is, well, the way that I love thinking about this is that the sun shines on everyone, right? The righteous and the unrighteous. The sun shines on everyone. There's no one who is outside that sunshine. We all have access to it. We all receive it. There's not one person who hoards the sunlight, right? They can't. It's impossible. And that's an analogy that we can use when we're thinking about uh, the universe or God, right? It doesn't play favorites. There are these things that are held in place, and our lives are all the same. We have this incredible power that we're born with, and potentiality, and that means that everyone has it. The universe has no favorites. It's sort of like, I remember my grandmother always made me feel like I was the favorite, right? And I just loved that, right? That I felt like I was the favorite. I was the oldest, and the firstborn, and I was this and that and the other. And everyone, all my grandmother's grandchildren, felt like they were the favorite. And that's the way that it is, right? We are all highly favored, and we are special in our own ways, right? So everyone gets the same treatment, the same amount of love, the same amount of everything, love, and the same access to abundance as anyone else, right? That's there. We, as human beings, are the ones who put the limits on that. It is all there. So he writes, universal principles are never respecters of persons. The universe has no favorites. Therefore it is written, and let him that is athirst come, and whosoever will, let him take the water of life freely. Revelations 22:17. And Ernest Holmes does refer to um, biblical scripture frequently, and there is that foundation of Christian thought within his work, and oftentimes that gets lost um, in when other emphasis is placed in this. However, we have to go back. If we're going back to basics, we're looking at how different scriptures and different religious truth comes into religious science, supporting it, and how science also takes up a lot uh, of the explanation of what is and how we use it, right? How do we use it? And, I'm thinking of this not as we are harnessing necessarily that power. We're just aligning with it. We are we are not we are not the Most High, although we have access to everything that is the Most High. We are a part of it, and it is a part of us. So this is a very expansive, no separation way of thinking. We're not separate from God. God is not in this other plane, um, devoid of connection with humans. We are together, and that presence is with us at all times. And what I love about this is that, as I mentioned, this is happening right when psychology is coming into the fore. And what Ernest Holmes says, let us then approach the science of mind, the science of spiritual psychology, with awe, but not with fear, with truly a humble thought, but not with a sense that we are unworthy. And I think this is such an important sentence that, we think about our ancestors who were in awe, right? And there's a lot of things that we read descriptions of encounters with God, right? And there's that awe, and oftentimes there's quaking and shaking and fear, right? Fear of this unknown. And yet, what he's saying is, yes, we can meet it with awe, and we should. We should have that wonder when we are thinking of God and when we are encountering God in our daily lives. We do have that awe and wonder, but no fear, because this creative force, this great moving mover, is moving in and through us with love, unconditional love, and wisdom. It's not to hurt us, not to eradicate us off the face of the earth. None of that. Not annihilation, not eternal damnation. None of that. There is just this incredible power that is love, that only wants us to be free and exist joyously. And that is truly something to be in awe of. So he asks us to approach it normally, happily, and willing to accept, glad to experiment, hoping and believing that the result of our efforts we shall derive a great good, a sound understanding of the natural laws of life as they apply to the individual and his relationship to the whole universal scheme of things. Again, the emphasis on relationship, how we are related to the whole universal scheme of things. And remember, this is no respecter of persons. Everyone has this ability and opportunity to explore this aspect of life. Now, we know that we put a big emphasis on prayer in religious science or spiritual mind treatment. And we do have a technology for that aligns us with God. And I spoke about aligning, using, sounds kind of odd to me, but that is the same as, how do we do this? What are we going to do? Well, we align with God, right? And when we align with God, we're responding to God. We're on that same wavelength, right? We're responding, we're receiving, we're receptors. And then we are distributing that. For example, we may be distributing that in our body. We may be distributing that in our body and throughout all those that we come in contact with. So that alignment, that distribution is that healing method that we are engaged in. So God responds to everyone, right? Everyone. And that our our part in this is, are we able to respond to God, to the thing itself? Or are we closed off? We don't believe. We are not on the wavelength, right? We can tune in. I mean, it's sort of thinking about, tuning in somehow. We know we have all these channels out there. What channel are we going to tune into? Well, we have the choice of tuning into the God channel, and we can be a part of it in that way, right? A conscious part of it. That's a conscious step that we take, right? We're always a part of it. It's always in us, but consciously we have to bring that to consciousness. And he writes, we shall never encompass God, and yet we shall always be in God and of God. So I want to, this we can, like I said, there's so much packed into this, and I don't want to give it short shrift, but I do want to just hammer in that he is bringing in science, he's bringing in reason, he's bringing in all these aspects that we have as human beings as gifts in order to interrogate what it is, what truth is. And he did that his entire life. And faith, right? What kind of faith do we have that in all of this? And I'm just going to close by saying that this is what he says: learning to trust will make us happy. I think that's one of the toughest things that we're dealing with right now. Trusting one another. And I'm not saying, trust with absolutely no 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 discerning, right? But when we don't trust one another, we do things to one another that that are harmful, destructive. And when we cultivate that trust, we can create relationships that work, and we can actually be those God distributors when we're trusting. So, what he says is, there is a power in the universe that honors our faith in it. There is a law in the universe which exacts the uttermost farthing. We all wish to feel that the power behind everything is good as well as creative, an eternal and changeless intelligence in which man lives and moves and has his being. Intuitively, we sense that every man in his native state is some part or manifestation of this eternal principle, and that the entire problem of limitation, evil, suffering, and uncertainty is not God ordained, but it is the result of ignorance. It has been written that the truth shall make us free, provided we know the truth. And we note that the evolution of man's consciousness brings with it the acquisition of new powers and higher possibilities. So that potentiality is always there. And that power is always responding to us. And we, in turn, if we can respond to it, we have new powers and new possibilities, and we manifest that good here on earth. So I want to leave us with that there is faith that we cultivate in ourselves, and there is love, there is this entire aspect of the thing itself that we have the opportunity to experience and know and come into our own individualization as an essence, divine emanation of God. So, everyone, have a wonderful week, and remember that we're here every Saturday, and there's always a new perspective, and there's places where we do crossover. There's things. This is a dialogue, so I really invite you to attend every week or listen when you can, and because this is available at all times. So listen in and get in on this conversation and explore that incredible thing that we are calling in this first chapter, the thing itself. Have a wonderful week.